The Lives of the Saints by Father Alban Butler. Blessed Peter the Venerable. December 25th. At the beginning of the 12th century, the Abbey of Cluny, the center and captaincy of 100 monasteries and their dependencies scattered throughout Europe, was governed by an incompetent and unworthy monk named Pontius, who had been elected to the post when he was still too young. In view of the general discontent, Pontius resigned his post in circumstances amounting to deposition, and, as his successor died almost immediately after assuming office, Father Peter de Montboissier, prior of Domine, was elected in his place. Peter belonged to a noble family of the Auvergne, had been educated at the monastery of Sauxillange, dependent on Cluny, and already at the age of 20 was prior of Vézelay. He was barely 30 years old when he was elected to govern the Mother House and its federation of monasteries. He took office in 1122, and during the 34 years that he held it, the Abbey of Cluny achieved such influence and such great prosperity as it never had again. However, during the early days of his task, he was not without bitterness and difficulties. In the year 1125, Pontius, the former abbot, arrived from Italy at the head of a well-equipped army, appeared at Cluny when Abbot Peter was absent, took the house by storm, violently expelled all the monks who refused to accept his command, and settled down to administer the affairs of the monastery in his usual disorderly manner. The supporters of Peter and those of Pontius sent delegations to Rome, summoned by Pope Honorius I, who condemned Pontius to degradation and imprisonment. As a result of that sentence, an unfortunate controversy arose between the monasteries of Citeaux and Cluny, since St. Bernard accused the Cluniacs of laxity, and the latter replied with the charge that the rule of the Cistercians was humanly impracticable. The general trend that followed the controversy showed that Abbot Peter supported the tolerant extension of the rule of St. Benedict. After a rigorous examination and a thorough investigation into the accusations of the Cistercians, Abbot Peter, together with Abbot Suger of Saint-Denis, responded to whatever truth there was in the criticisms with a reform and the imposition of a stricter discipline. It was at that time, in the year 1130, that Abbot Peter visited England and attempted to bring Peterborough Abbey under the direction of Cluny. In 1139, he traveled to Spain, where he engaged the services of two men who knew Arabic well to translate the Quran and some works of astronomy into Latin for the greater culture and prestige of his abbey. In 1140, Peter Abelard stopped in Cluny during his trip to Rome in order to appeal against the condemnation of his opinions pronounced in Sens. But while Abelard was in Cluny, news arrived that the condemnation had been confirmed by Pope Innocent. Abbot Peter then offered lodging to Abelard, through his good offices obtained from the Holy See a mitigation of the condemnatory sentence, and arranged an interview between Abelard and St. Bernard to bring about a reconciliation between the two. He always showed that he was a loyal and generous friend of Abelard, and when Abelard died 2 years later, he sent the body to Abbess Eloise to be buried in the cemetery of Paraclete, with all the assurances that he had died with absolution and in communion with the Church. Likewise, Abbot Peter wrote for his friend an extravagant epitaph in which he compared the philosopher Abelard with Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle. It was one of the characteristics of Peter the Venerable to mix his mercy and sympathy for the sinner with a just detestation of sin. He defended the Jews from the massacres, but admitted that they had provoked them. He wrote against the Petrobrusian heretics of southern France. He attended the Synod of Rheims, where the teachings of Gilbert de la Porree, Bishop of Poitiers, were contested. His contemporaries held him in high esteem, and the many who consulted him corresponded with him extensively. But Peter the Venerable did not cease to write on his own numerous theological and polemical treatises, sermons, and hymns, such as the Christmas hymn, Caelum, Gaude, Terra, Plode. It was fitting that the author of this beautiful hymn died, as was his express wish, on Christmas Day 1156, after having preached to his monks on the meaning of the feast. In the course of time, Peter the Venerable was venerated by the members of his own congregation and by the faithful in general. His cult has never been formally approved by the Holy See, but his name was inserted in the French martyrologies, and his feast is observed in the Diocese of Arras on December 29th.